Hello, welcome to my top 10 best movies of 2021. If you've been keeping track, 2 days ago I released my top 5 most disappointing and top 5 most surprising movies of 2021. And then yesterday I released my top 10 worst movies of 2021. And then on January 1st, I'll be releasing my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2022. And so that leads us to today, where I finally get to talk about my top 10 best movies of the year. These are the movies that I loved the most this year. So I should enjoy talking about these ones more so than I did talking about the ones that I did not like. Now, unlike my top 10 worst of the year, I actually have a few honorable mentions for my top 10 best of the year because there were quite a few good movies that came out this year. I'm not going to take very long to talk about them. I'm just going to basically mention them and then move on. So, these are in no particular order, but The Suicide Squad. This was a very good movie, very nice change of pace for the DCEU, and I thoroughly enjoyed all the quirky characters in it. We also have The Kingsman. I'm a pretty big fan of the first two Kingsman movies, and so I was patiently awaiting this one to come out, and it finally did come out, and I was thoroughly surprised, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. We also have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I was pretty lukewarm on this when I first saw it, but then it just stuck with me, and I've rewatched it a few times since it came out, and it has worked its way up for favorite of the year. I thoroughly enjoyed the character of Shang-Chi, and I like the Ten Rings, also a great villain of the MCU in this one as well. And then our final honorable mention is going to be House of Gucci. This movie kind of came out of nowhere for me, just looked like it had a stacked cast, and so I went to see it, and it was very good, awesome performances all around, very interesting story. So, yes, those are my 4 honorable mentions, again, in no particular order, but I just wanted to include them anyways. Alright, so now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, we can move on to the top 10. So coming in 10th place is going to be Judas and the Black Messiah. This is one of the first movies I saw this year, and it has remained near the top of this list the entire year. I absolutely loved this movie. It's a very powerful movie with a very powerful message. It's one of the few movies based off true events that I would say I love. That's typically not movies I gravitate towards. Amazing performances from our 2 leads. And yeah, this is probably the movie that I left the theater with like the biggest impact of throughout the entire year. And yeah, I thought it was a very good story and a very tragic story at the same time. So Judas and the Black Messiah is a great movie. Please check it out. And coming in 9th place is going to be Godzilla vs. Kong. This movie is just dumb fun, but it is so much fun. The story is pretty simple, not a whole lot of depth to it, but it's just fun seeing Godzilla and King Kong fight each other, and then eventually teaming up against the Mecha Godzilla. Like, come on, this is just fun entertainment. I've been a pretty, solid fan of the little monsterverse they've created, and I thought Godzilla vs. Kong was the best of all 4 of those movies. Really enjoyed the cast in this one too. Surprisingly had quite a few people I recognized in this one. But yeah, the main thing about this movie is just it's Godzilla versus Kong fighting, and it delivers exactly what it promised. Coming slightly above that at number 8 is going to be Nobody. Now this movie came out of nowhere for me. I didn't really know what it was going to be about until that first trailer dropped a few months before the movie release, and I was like, oh, This looked like a John Wick type of movie, and it very much is a John Wick type of movie, but yeah, very good action. This is the first time I've seen Bob Odenkirk do anything, and I was instantly a fan of him. I think Christopher Lloyd was awesome in this movie. The whole third act where he kind of does like some Home Alone sort of stuff at his office was really interesting. Um, but yeah, this movie was great. And in some aspects of Nobody, I prefer it to John Wick, but I think John Wick will always be more nostalgic and just be better to me. But I think Nobody is definitely up there with some of the John Wick movies. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed Nobody. Coming in 7th place has to be Spider-Man No Way Home. I don't think top 10 best of the year won't include Spider-Man No Way Home from just about anybody, because this movie is awesome. Just what they were able to pull off in this movie is amazing, but also that it works is even better, and that it's satisfying. The only thing that holds this movie back from being best of the year for me personally is that the first half is a little clunky with the setup for how all these people from the multiverse get pulled in to our MCU verse. And also, some of the payoff doesn't feel earned. I hear a lot of people comparing it to Endgame, or saying that, oh, this had more setup than Endgame because it's taking in 20 years of Spider-Man films instead of 10 years of Marvel films. And I don't understand that argument, because where in Endgame they set everything up in the previous movies, Spider-Man No Way Home, it's just bringing the characters over. It doesn't set it up. It's just like payoff without the setup, if that makes sense. So while Spider-Man No Way Home, definitely a very fun and enjoyable movie, there's just some nitpicks and things that do bother me about the film, but this might be the most rewatchable film of the year for me personally. So, coming in 6th place for the year is going to have to be A Quiet Place Part 2. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Might have been my second most anticipated movie of the year, behind Halloween Kills. This was my most anticipated movie of 2020, and then it got delayed till this year, and so I was dying to see this movie. This was one of my most anticipated of the year, and it lived up to my every expectation. It was just as good as the first one, if not even better. I absolutely loved A Quiet Place Part 2. A Quiet Place was one of the biggest surprises of a movie over the past 5 or so years for me. And so naturally I was very excited to see how they were going to follow that up. I was just really excited to see this movie. Paid off everything. I think that the addition of Cillian Murphy to the cast was awesome. He did a great job in this movie. So is Djimon Hounsou. He was great as well. And it just expands the world of the first Quiet Place. Like, it feels like a sequel that was earned. It's not like a sequel just to cash in on the money's sake, but no, it feels earned, and it's an amazing movie, just right up there with the original A Quiet Place as some of the best creature features we've gotten in probably the past 10 or so years. So Quiet Place Part 2, you're awesome. I hope that we get a Part 3 that's just as good and make a perfect trilogy. Coming in 5th place is going to be Last Night in Soho. This movie also kind of came out of nowhere for me. I had seen the trailers, heard it was directed by Edgar Wright, which I've seen a few of his things, but I just heard he was a big name and does some good stuff, so I decided to check it out. Also had Anya Taylor-Joy, who I'm a pretty big fan of all of her work. So naturally I was curious about this movie, and I thought the trailers looked interesting. It was kind of like a slasher sort of movie, but yeah, I just watched this movie and I thought the entire cast did an amazing job. It's such a weird and wacky concept, but it makes sense and you just go along with it. I think the style is great of this movie as well, And then the twist at the end of this movie is really good, and I didn't see it coming. But it totally makes sense, and it enhances the entire rest of the movie. So this is one of my favorite horror movies to come out this year. Yeah, and Last Night in Soho, very, very good, well done, and very well crafted movie. Coming in fourth place is going to be Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I walked into this one with pretty low expectations, and I ended up loving it. This is one of the best superhero movies to come out in a while. It's truly an epic film. It's not one that I will rewatch quite as much. That's why it's only number 4 out of all the movies I saw this year. But it's just the runtime is so long that it's not as rewatchable as a lot of other superhero movies or just a lot of other movies. But it's shot amazingly well. Every character is developed and fully fleshed out. It's everything you'd want out of a comic book movie, done amazingly. So, Zack Snyder's Justice League is one of the best DC movies, definitely the best of the DCEU in my opinion, and my pick for 4th best of the year of 2021. Now we're on to the top 3 of the year, and if I thought picking a top 10 was so hard that I had to include some honorable mentions, I mean, these top 3 are ridiculously close. As far as I'm concerned, we have a 3-way tie for best of the year, in my mind. But at the end of the day, I do have to pick which ones I prefer over the others, so take that as you will, but I think all 3 of these films are pretty equally as good. So that means coming in at 3rd place is going to have to be Malignant. This is my favorite horror movie of the year, and honestly, this is quickly working its way up my list of favorite horror movies. I absolutely loved Malignant. I knew absolutely nothing about it pretty much walking into it, and the twist honestly makes this movie as good as it is. I loved the twist of this movie. Otherwise, I just thought it was a kind of fine slasher, but then once you see that twist, it just enhanced the entire movie for me. And this is a movie I've watched numerous times since I watched it just about a month ago. I absolutely adore this movie. Yeah, and it gets better with every single rewatch. So, I don't want to give too much away about Malignant, but if you're in the mood for a really good horror movie of the year, check out Malignant. You will not catch the twist. I guarantee you, you will not catch that twist. Coming in 2nd place is going to be Ghostbusters Afterlife. This was also one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I thought the trailers that were released last year looked awesome, and this movie kept getting delayed, and finally got to see Ghostbusters Afterlife, and this movie was everything you would want out of a Ghostbusters sequel. This is the true sequel to the original Ghostbusters. Everything in this movie doesn't just feel like conveniences for the sake of plot and story. No, everything feels earned. It's not just nostalgic for nostalgia's sake, like The Matrix Resurrections was. No, all the nostalgia moments were earned in this movie. Yeah, just everything about this movie works for me. It's such a faithful sequel to that original. It understands what made the original Ghostbusters so awesome, and it feels tonally in line with the original Ghostbusters, and is definitely the most emotional movie out of all the Ghostbusters movies thus far. So Ghostbusters Afterlife was great. But that leaves only one movie that I thought was better than Ghostbusters Afterlife, and to everybody's surprise, including my own, we're gonna have to go with No Time to Die as my pick for the best movie of 2021. Ooh, I expected to dislike this movie, and I was just as shocked as ever when it became my favorite movie of the year. I absolutely loved No Time to Die. The whole espionage stuff actually worked for me in this movie, and I'm typically not a guy that is into espionage stuff. All the action in this movie is the best of the year. All the twists and turns this movie takes, just tying up Daniel Craig's era of Bond perfectly. Oh, this movie's awesome. This is definitely the most emotional movie of the year for me. It just hit me in the feels the most out of every movie I saw. And this movie was better upon rewatch and just solidified that I loved this movie the most out of every movie I saw this year. As far as I'm concerned, this is the best James Bond movie we've ever gotten, and typically I'm not really a Bond guy. It's not really my sort of thing, so it surprises me that a James Bond movie is my favorite of the year. But yeah, No Time to Die is awesome. So thank you for tuning in to my top 10 best of the year. Make sure to tune in a few days when I discuss my top 10 most anticipated movies for 2022. And if you would like, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section and post some of your favorite movies of the year. So, with all that being said, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.